Are you ready for the water treatment industry's biggest event of the year? The AWT Annual Convention and Expo is coming to the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, November 12th through 15th. Join industry leaders and professionals for 4 days packed with cutting-edge education, presentations, and powerful networking opportunities. Explore the expo hall with over 95 exhibitors, attend seminars, and connect with peers. Don't miss your chance to gain the insights and connections you need to drive your business forward. Register today for the AWT Annual Convention and Expo. Scaling Up Nation, Trace Blackmore here with some mind-blowing news that'll make your job a whole lot easier. 3 industry titans, Masters Company, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemical have joined forces to create your ultimate one-stop shop for your water treatment needs. We're talking over 60 years of Masters Company's expertise in private label products and cutting-edge test kits. Radical Polymers' game-changing Inisha additives, and MFG Chemical's custom manufacturing prowess. These American companies are bringing you top-notch quality and reliability all under one umbrella. From blending and ultra concentrates to specialized polymers and custom solutions, they've got you covered. And with multiple AWT Supplier of the Year awards between them, you know you're getting the best of the best. Ready to revolutionize your water treatment game? Head over to scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. I know you can't wait for the AWT convention taking place November 11th through 15th. While you're there, be sure to stop by and see the whole gang from Masters, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemicals at booths 200 through 208. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, today is Halloween, so I think we need to switch from our regular theme music to something a little more appropriate. Sean, do you think you can help us out? There we go. That's better. Happy Halloween, Scaling Up Nation. You know, this has been a very interesting year because actual holidays have fallen on Friday, which we have been able to celebrate this year, and Halloween is one of those. Of course, another one was 4th of July, and we'll talk a little bit more about that one a little bit later, but happy Halloween, Scaling Up Nation. Halloween has always been one of my favorite holidays. I don't know why. I like the weather change. It's normally a little bit cooler in the States for Halloween. It gets a little bit darker earlier. I know some people absolutely hate that. My wife is not a fan of that. When we went to Alaska, it would get dark at about 1:45, and then the sun would start coming up again about 4 a.m., and my wife loved that. Me, I found it difficult to sleep. But she just loves longer days. I don't know. I kind of like it getting dark earlier. We're all a little different. I guess that's what makes life interesting because everybody likes something different. And one of the things that I like is Halloween. And I remember for the longest time, my wife, Stacy, and I, we would always do a Halloween party. Now, I don't think we've had a Halloween party since we've been in our current house. And I am sad to say that that has probably been 17 or so years since we've been in this house. But before that, each and every year, we would have a Halloween party and we would invite everybody that we would know. It would be a costume party and we would have all sorts of treats. And I don't think we had really any tricks, but it was just a lot of fun to get people together. And we stopped doing that. I don't know why we stopped doing that. Well, I guess because of why we stopped doing anything, other things take precedent. We get more responsibility, and we just don't have the time to do things that we once did. And let's face it, we're never getting any more time. We have the same amount of time that we've always had. But as we go through life, we have more responsibilities and we have things that we are needing to do because of those responsibilities. And normally those responsibilities require resources. And without us doing those responsibilities, we don't have the resources to do things like live indoors and buy food. It's just part of being an adult. Well, also something about being an adult is we can go to R-rated movies. We can go to horror movies if that is your thing. And I have to say that my wife absolutely loves horror movies. I can take them or leave them, but I enjoy them through her. They're just so cheesy, some of them. But I remember when I was in middle school and Nightmare on Elm Street came out. That was 1984, and I was not allowed to watch it. And some friends and we snuck down and we watched Nightmare on Elm Street on HBO. And we thought that was the most terrifying movie that we have ever seen. Well, we recently rewatched that with my son Hayden. Hayden thought it was the dumbest thing he ever saw. And I have to say, it was not as scary as I remember. There were some pretty cheesy things. And as we've gotten older, special effects have definitely come into their own. And some of the things that we thought were just amazing in the mid 80s, not so much when you hold them up to the 2025 lens of what they can do with computer generation and all sorts of special effects these days. But let's face it, if you are a horror movie fan, you have seen boiler rooms portrayed in horror movies. And you got to wonder why. You know, boiler rooms are normally in a claustrophobic atmosphere. There's normally steam leaks that make it kind of a steamy visual, kind of an eerie visual. Normally there's a labyrinth of pipes and all sorts of things that increase the suspense of the scene, gives lots of areas for our stalker to maybe hide behind. So there are all of these things inside a boiler room that are made to make us be fearful. And it's not just Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that's probably the most famous movie that took a boiler room and made a whole character around a boiler operator. Of course, I'm talking about Freddy Krueger, but that's not the only movie to do that. Hellraiser had a movie called Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. That was in 1992, and that was set in a boiler room, a nightclub boiler room. And that was all about a gruesome massacre and all sorts of horror hijinks ensued during that movie. There was another movie that came out in 2015 called The Black Coat's Daughter, and this was a psychological horror around a school's boiler room. And then there was a short in 2017, a movie called The Boiler Room, not the one about sales and the stock market, which was actually a really good movie, probably one of the best movies on how to make a cold call. But that's not the movie I'm talking about. This movie's called The Boiler Room, and it's a short, and it's all around a boiler room, and there's a monster inside the boiler room. And I know there's a ton more movies out there. If we look outside of the United States, there's a movie in Italy called The Case of the Bloody Iris. That was in 1972. That's a horror movie that takes place in the boiler room. And then a 1965 movie called The Mirage is all about a boiler room horror movie. So there you go. All sorts of movies that are making boiler rooms scary. You know, Disney is even in on this. If you go to Disney's Tower of Terror, the ride where they take you in an elevator and then they drop you down a couple of stories, you actually walk through a simulated boiler room. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about the hidden Mickeys that are all over Disneyland and Disney World, but they will put symbols of Mickey Mouse hidden all throughout the theme parks. And there are hidden Mickeys in the boiler room. In fact, the last time I was there, they had some rope by the boiler room area and it was wound up in a hidden Mickey. So there you go. Even Disney is getting into it. But why are boilers, when it comes to Hollywood and how people look at boilers and boiler rooms, why does that cause fear? Why does that cause fright? Well, does it in water treaters? Do we feel fear or fright when we are in boiler rooms? And I remember back my very first boiler room that I can remember going into with my dad. And I remember thinking that, not that I was scared, but it definitely was not the most bright, friendly, joyous place. It was in a sub basement. It was not the cleanest of places. Now, it wasn't necessarily dirty, but it wasn't pristine either. Now, I don't remember all the Hollywood steam leaks that they have normally in the films. Thank goodness, that means us water treaters are probably not doing our jobs. But I do remember it was very hot, and because of that, it was not very comfortable. It was not very well lit, and there was really no place for us to do our work. We had to do a makeshift table on some buckets. I think maybe my dad pulled up a drum and put his test kit on that. So maybe that's why some water treaters are scared of boiler rooms or have that eerie feeling. They're just not built for ways to make us do our best work. Maybe you can talk with your clients and put some better lighting in there. Maybe you have a table or something that you can bring from another area, so now you have some workspace. Or maybe you have the type of customer where they have a lot better facility someplace else, and now all you have to do is take your samples and observations in the boiler room. Now, note I said observations because I have seen many water treaters take samples and that's all they do. And then they go someplace else and they cool and run their samples. Well, folks, if you haven't taken an accounting of everything that's going on with the equipment that you're charged in treating, you're not getting the full story. So are you getting the right pressures on that deaerator? Maybe it's a feedwater tank. Is it the right temperature? What's going on? When was the last time the boiler logs were filled out? Who blew the boiler down the last time? Did they blow it down correctly? Do they have a surface blow? And is that working properly? Do they have some sort of cooling device that's off of that surface blow? Is that working properly? Do they have a sample cooler so you don't burn yourself when you're taking your sample? What are all the things within the boiler room that you need to know about that you can take some notes of, not just simply take a sample? Now, sampling is very important, but it's not the full story. In fact, it's not any story at all if we can't tie it into the picture of exactly what's going on within all of the equipment. So before we even take a sample, hopefully we have talked to our boiler operator, if there even is such a thing anymore. And maybe that's what we need to make a horror movie about, that all the boiler operators have disappeared and that boiler is just allowed to run almost independently until there's an issue or until their friendly neighborhood water treater appears each and every month. Is that the last time that boiler got any sort of attention? Now, back in my dad's day, there wasn't just one boiler operator, there were several, and they were a team, they were a department, they worked together, they filled out logs together, and then they met with my dad to talk about what the next course of action should be. Well, nation, we just simply don't have very many boiler operators anymore. We have people that have other job responsibilities, and oh yeah, when you get a chance, make sure you take care of the boiler too. Well, when that's the job description, our boiler is getting a lot of neglect. So maybe that's a reason to bring some fright and fear into the boiler room. Well, I mentioned water samples. It's very important to make sure that we're collecting our boiler water samples properly. Hopefully, you have a sample cooler because let's face it, you can get burned on boiler samples. But if you don't have one of those, hopefully you have a way of collecting your water samples so you will not get burned. Now, the team here, we've got special holders that will hold our sample cups, our sample bottles, so we do not get burned because unfortunately, and this is a horror, that we don't have sample coolers on every single one of our boilers. Now, when you take a boiler sample, you want to make sure that you get all of the sample into the bottle that you can. And what I mean by that is you don't want any airspace in that bottle. You want to purge all the airspace out. So basically, when you put that lid on, there's no air in between the lid and the sample. Now, why is that important? Because most likely you're going to test for sulfite. And what's sulfite's job? It's to work against oxygen. Well, if you've got a lot of headspace in that sample, especially if you're agitating that sample with a lot of headspace, you're not really getting a good sulfite representative sample. So that's what you want to do with that. And then you want to go ahead and cool it. Now, whether you have some ice that's available to you, or maybe you run it under some water, you want to make sure that you cool the sample. And I've always heard to about 100 degrees. My friend Mark Lewis says if you can grab that bottle and you don't get burned and you don't want to pull your hand away, you're probably pretty darn close to where you need to be. And the reason for that is some of the reagents that we use are temperature sensitive. Specifically, let's talk about sulfite again. That's the hero of our show today, it seems. Sulfite uses starch in order to activate the test. Specifically, I believe it's potato starch. So if you have a hot boiler sample, you're going to cook the potatoes and you will not get the same results. Now, there have been several test kit manufacturing companies that have done some videos on what it looks like with a cooled sample, what it looks like on a non-cooled sample, and you get some very different results. So if you're not running your sulfite test properly with the proper temperatures, you really aren't getting the right answer. And a lot of our tests are like that. Maybe they're not temperature sensitive, but they are preparation sensitive, or there's some sort of interference sensitivity. So if we don't know our tests, we are not going to get the best answer. And now, do those tests inside of a boiler room where it's hot, not a lot of air circulating around, there's no good place to set up, and we have no light. And now you're trying to read color changes from one color to another. Well, folks, it's no wonder why Hollywood uses the boiler room as its horror scene. Well, it's my hope that through listening through some of this, that you're now thinking, I don't have to do my tests in Hollywood's favorite place to make people scared, where there's no light, where there's no air, where it's hot, where there's no place to set up, and maybe it's even dirty. I can take my samples from there and I can go someplace else, providing that I get all of the information that I need. So when I actually get my test results, I know whether they make sense or not. And that's the other part of the test. I've worked with so many new water treaters that will just trust whatever the result of their test is. That's what they write down, and then they move on about their business. Well, folks, that is not the job. The job is not to run the test and believe the test. The job is to run the test and use that to see if that supports your hypothesis about what is going on with the system. So if you have not made a hypothesis that I think this is what's going on with the system, and now I'm going to use my test to prove or disprove what I think is going on with the system, why even run the test? Your tests are just there to prove your theories. And if you're not proving your theories, you're going to make some new ones along the way because your tests are going to point those things out to you. Folks, your tests are not the end-all be-all. They are an absolute necessary, but what is the end-all be-all is the water treater that is already trying to figure out what is going on in their systems and now using their observations that include their testing to now prove or disprove those hypotheses. So it's my hope that that is how you are now looking at your next boiler sample. And we're using education, we're using observation, we're using talking to other people that are in that facility so we can get the best hypothesis we can. Nation, that's not scary. That is water treatment. That is us doing our job at the best level. So again, not scary. We're celebrating Halloween. We're recognizing the boiler room. And who knows, maybe this episode actually encouraged your customer to put in some better lighting in the boiler room so you can get some better results. Everybody wins on Halloween. Nation, one of the other ways people are winning is they are going to scalinguph2o.com. They're going over to our events page and they are learning about so many things about what is happening in the water treatment industry. And then they are taking that information and they are going to conferences and training and they are making themselves better. And of course, one of the things that's just right around the corner is the Association of Water Technology's annual convention and expo taking place November 12th through 15th in Colorado Springs, Colorado at the Broadmoor Hotel. And folks, the Broadmoor is just a beautiful place, so I hope to see you there. That's going to be one of the conventions that I am attending this year. And not only am I attending, I am privileged to be able to present 4, yes, you heard them, 4 different papers at this year's Association of Water Technologies convention. Now, I think I told you on last week's show that for the last couple of years, I have been trying to get AWT to pick up my procedures presentation. And for the last couple of years, they have said, no, we do not want that presentation. Well, earlier this year, I actually made that into a podcast, and I still wanted to do it for AWT. I truly believe that when we put 60% of what we need to do into a procedure, it allows us not to forget to do the silly stuff. And then that 40% is exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. So we can now do the magic that we do with inside water treatment. So here are the papers that I am going to be presenting at AWT on November 14th at 2:30 p.m. in the International Center South. I'm going to be presenting on how to present better presentations. And I will tell you, I have really made myself a student. When I see somebody that presents really well, I will follow them. I will try to dissect what they're doing that makes them such a good speaker, such a good presenter. And that's actually what I have done in this presentation. I want to tell you some of the things that I've learned about being a keynote speaker and some things that I've learned with working with my special speaking coach, Des Thornton, who's been a guest on this podcast. I'll share some things about him, but I'm also going to share some things on some people that I have observed on how they do a really good job. Now, in the same exact room, but just a half an hour later, I am presenting again, And this is on one of my favorite books. And if you've taken the sales class with me with AWT, we've spoken about this book, but it's Simon Sinek's Start with Why. And I truly believe when you can recraft your company message about why you do what you do instead of what it is that you do, that changes the entire narrative, and it gets whoever you're speaking with to want to lean in and say, tell me more. So I'm going to be doing that on November 14th at 2:30 to 3. And then on the following day, I have two more presentations that you get to hear me. And one is an hour long. It's going to be in the general session. It's going to be 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm talking all about working genius. And we've had several people on the podcast to talk about working genius. And since they've been on the podcast, I have become certified to talk about working genius. And working genius just creates this amazing language all around how do we talk about work? How do we delegate work? How does work get done? And how do we recognize what we love to do and what energizes us and what just sucks all the life out of us when we have to do? So I'm going to give you that language, and I'm going to talk all about working genius in the International Center South from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then directly after that, I'm back again in the same International Center South, and I'm going to be talking about the processes. So this is what started it all. This is why I wanted to present with AWT. They saved the best for last. I hope that you were there because I'm going to share how we should be capturing what it is that makes us who we are. We're a company and we're good at doing what our company does. Well, how do we make sure that that stays consistent? And how do we make sure that we don't forget to do the silly things while we're doing the fancy things, trying to create those hypotheses that we talked about earlier? And we're now solving what's going on in the water mystery of the boiler room or the chiller or the wastewater plant or wherever it is that we are doing our industrial water treatment magic. I'm going to talk to you about how do we create processes to make sure that we can stay at the top of our game. Again, that's going to be at the Association of Water Technology's annual convention. And folks, if you can come in a day early, if you are a business owner, I highly recommend that you attend November 11th, and that's going to be the Business Owners Conference. Last week, we heard from my friend, Culture Index expert, Randy Farjan. She's going to be speaking more on Culture Index, and they've got a great lineup all to help you go back to your respective areas of water treatment, wherever that might be, and start doing some things differently. Now, we try to do this each and every week within the Rising Tide Mastermind, but we only have 76 members within the Rising Tide Mastermind. So there's a large population that are not members of the Rising Tide Mastermind, and this is the only exposure that they have to maybe thinking about something a little bit differently. So I encourage you to go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events page, and you will see everything that we talked about so you can register. And folks, we're getting a little close to this event, so you might want to make sure that you do this sooner rather than later. And I've been told that you might have to stay someplace besides the host hotel. But you never know, somebody might cancel, so it doesn't hurt to give them a call. See if you haven't gotten a room yet, maybe they do have a room available. But folks, there are other hotels in the area that can take your room request. So don't give up if there are no rooms at the inn, at the Broadmoor. You can find something someplace else. And the week right after the AWT, I know you're going to be sad that you can't continue some of those conversations that you started at AWT. Well, that's why we're doing the hang the very next week. So next Thursday after the AWT, November 20th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we have your solution to no AWT convention blues, and that, of course, is the hang. You can register for the hang by going to scalinguph2o.com, go over to the hang, and you can register, put that on your calendar, and then show up. And folks, I'm going to make it as entertaining as I can. I'll let you know about some current events, and then you will meet some people that could help you with existing problems that you're currently having. Or maybe they're problems you have not even experienced yet, but you met somebody that's going to jog your memory when you have that issue with a water softener, and you remember that you met Alan. And you give Alan a call, and Alan can help you out with that water softener problem. I've heard so many stories like that. I want that story to be your story, and it can be by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to the hang and registering, and then showing up on November 20th so we can all enjoy each other's company at the hang. Scaling Up Nation, we're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Attention water treatment business owners. Mark your calendar for November 11th. The day before the AWT annual convention for the AWT Business Owners Meeting, designed just for company leaders like you. Connect with peers, gain actionable strategies, and get ahead of industry trends. Don't miss this opportunity to focus on your business growth and network with the best in the industry. Secure your spot today and start your convention experience one step ahead. Let's dive back in right where we left off. Nation, we have so many events that are on our events page. Many of them are from you that you said, Trace, you don't have this on the Scaling Up H2O events page. You need to get it up there. Well, thank you for letting me know about that. So if you are looking at all of the events that we know that are going on in the industrial water treatment world, and folks, there are a lot of things going on out there. So if you haven't been there, you need to go ahead and go on that webpage and see what you are missing and see what you need to attend and plan for it accordingly. But if you do notice that something is not on there and it should be, go ahead and send us a quick note and we will get that on there. It's my goal, it is my team's goal to make sure we make water treatment a little bit easier for you. Heck, you're in dingy, dark, scary boiler rooms with no light, sweating with all that heat, and no place to set your test kit up. I know, it's Halloween, it's a scary sight, but we don't want water treatment to be scary. We want for you to have a one-stop place where you can find information like events, and that is the Scaling Up H2O webpage. You know, speaking of the Scaling Up H2O webpage, if you haven't been on there in a while, there is just so much information. I'm impressed at all the information. Of course, every episode we have ever done, almost 450 episodes up there. You have all of that information at your fingertips, all of the resources that those guests in the 450 episodes that we have shared with you, those guests have shared with us. We are putting that on our show notes pages so you have that information. And then anytime we have resources like Legionella and waterborne pathogens, we'll make a special page for that. So you just have one place to go and you can see what the entire world is doing. And you can look at all the different standards, all the different guidelines. We put that in a one-stop place for you to go find. We know it is hard to be an industrial water treater. We talked about how uncomfortable boiler rooms are. Well, we don't want it to be uncomfortable for you to find information. So if you have not explored the Scaling Up H2O website in a while, I think you will be amazed of all of the resources that are on there. Now, so many people tell me that they enjoy all the great things that James McDonald does, but they haven't kept up with all the things that James McDonald does. Well, don't worry about that. We've got all of that on the webpage too. So if you are not caught up with all of the What Are You Knows, you can go back through the other episodes and you can get caught up. But you are in luck because today we have a brand new What Are You Know with James.
Hello and welcome to What Are You Know? The game show where we find out what are you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Are You Know? Today's question is, what is the pressure of a fluid called that's measured relative to atmospheric pressure? It is called gauge pressure. Conversely, a pressure measured relative to a vacuum is called absolute pressure. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Are You Know?
Thank you, James. And Nation, as I said earlier, this is our Halloween episode. It's our pre-AWT episode, so I truly hope that you are getting ready for the Association of Water Technologies Conference just taking place in a few short weeks. Well, I want to take a moment and reflect on some of the things that we've been reflecting on. So this is the end of the month of October. And for the last two episodes, I've been reflecting on things that we have done this year. Specifically, I reflected on Industrial Water Week and how this was the strongest Industrial Water Week that we have ever had. And of course, we release a brand new episode each and every day during Industrial Water Week. And if you're wondering, October 5th, 2026 is what starts next year's Industrial Water Week. And I wanted to do a victory lap the week after Industrial Water Week. And not a victory lap for me, but a victory lap for the industrial water treatment community because so many people celebrated that this year. And we had so many people that helped us celebrate in our preparation for all the episodes that we did during that week. So I took a moment and I just talked about that. And a lot of you responded saying similar things, that you really enjoyed this Industrial Water Week. And then the next week in October, I reflected back on how we did Legionella Awareness Month and how this year was the biggest that has ever been. I saw companies all over the Scaling Up Nation post social media about Legionella Awareness Month. I even saw something come from the CDC, and that is just so incredibly cool. So Legionella Awareness Month is absolutely a thing. And this year, the thing was, how do we challenge what we think we already know? And so many of you have gotten in contact with my team or with me and said that you did that very thing. You are challenging what it is that you knew, and you're making sure that it's the latest and greatest information. And there's a lot of new things out there, and a lot of you are trying and challenging new things. And that is just incredible. Well, I started talking in the beginning of this show about how several holidays this year have actually fallen on the podcast release dates. Of course, those are Friday. Today is one of those days, our Halloween episode. But then July 4th was another one. Back on episode 427 that dropped on July 4th, you heard me read Patrick Henry's speech, "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death." And back in my childhood in elementary school, we had a lot of history in Richmond, Virginia. A lot of founding fathers were in that area. And Patrick Henry actually gave his speech to the Second Virginia Revolutionary Convention at St. John's Church on top of Church Hill, right in the middle of downtown Richmond. And I read that speech. And there were a lot of words within that speech that we just do not use anymore. And I tried to enunciate properly. And I heard from many of you that that was the first time you had ever heard that speech in its entirety. And there's a lot to that speech. And I shared with you that a lot of law students will study that speech because it pretty much covers everything that they study in law school about how to give a speech or how to speak with a jury. So just so much going on there. Again, that was episode 427. If you didn't listen to that, by all means, go back and listen to that. And this is our Halloween episode. So why am I talking about 4th of July? Well, folks, that was scary, because I was reading a historic speech, and I know I didn't do the best job in the world. I didn't do it the way Patrick Henry did, but I did expose a lot of people to that speech, and I had to make sure I was pronouncing all of those old English words that we just don't say very often or at all correctly. So that created some anxiety within that I had to get over. Well, folks, I think that's scary. You now have to give a speech in front of a bunch of people. Is that scary? I mentioned that I was going to do that 4 times at the AWT. Is that scary? Is that why we're talking about this on Halloween? I will tell you, I remember the very first time I spoke in public on water treatment, and my dad had asked me to give an educational speech through PowerPoint to one of his mechanical contractors, and I was sweating profusely. I did not know what I was talking about. I didn't know my slides, how they were going to transition. I was terrified that people were going to ask me questions. Even worse, maybe they asked me questions that I didn't know. And I thought that that was the most horrible experience ever. Well, folks, that was the first time that I had ever done that. Well, let me assure you that hundreds of times have happened in between that time and this time, so I don't get nervous like that anymore. And if you recall, back on episode 325, I shared one of our mastermind live events with all of you, and we actually shared our TED Talks that we did with the mastermind, and the winners, I guess we could say, of each group. I played those for you on episode 325. And on the one that I shared with you, it was called the butterfly line. And what that was all about was us getting butterflies in our stomach when we get ready to speak in front of a bunch of people. Or maybe it's anything that we do that we don't have a lot of experience with. So we get butterflies in our stomach, that anxious, nervous feeling. And my TED Talk, and I'm using quotes when I say TED Talk because we weren't on an official TED stage. We read a book called TED Talks, and then we each gave a TED Talk. And then you heard from each of the members' groups that elected that member to give their speech. I went ahead and recorded that. And then I shared that with the Scaling Up Nation. And I started out episode 325 with my butterfly line speech. And I said, the next time you get that feeling, don't look at it as nerves, as anxiety. Look at it as excitement, because you're getting ready to gain experience on the other side of whatever it is that you think you're nervous about, but you're really excited about. And now you're going to have that experience once it's done. So I really felt that butterfly line in the scenario that I described the very first time that I spoke about water treatment. But I did it again. And I did it again. And I did it again. I'm not going to keep on doing that for hundreds of times, but you get the point. And now the things that I was nervous about, I can anticipate because I've spoken in front of so many audiences. I work with a speaking coach, and he kind of teaches me how people listen and what is the best way to keep people's attention. What's the best way to get people to start to trust you when you are speaking? So, all of these different techniques I'm now able to use so I can share the information that I want to share. And Nation, I hope it's no surprise, I love sharing information about industrial water treatment. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't start from the most terrifying meeting that I can ever remember having when my dad introduced me to speak in front of that mechanical contractor group, and I had no idea what it was and how I was going to say what I needed to say. But I did it, I got through it, and I did it again, and I tried to get better each and every time. So I think you have to get scared a little bit in order to grow. And if you haven't gotten scared, regardless of whether you're standing inside of a boiler room or not, if you haven't gotten scared in a while, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, are you challenging yourself enough? Are you pushing yourself enough to get better? Now, I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that myself personally, I can always push myself more. And whenever I do feel that anxious feeling, I do try to embrace it as excitement because I know I now found something that I can become better at. And on the other side of that are going to be new opportunities that I don't have right now. But if I can get through that butterfly feeling, I know that I'm going to be a better person because of it. Now, speaking of something that I did that was pretty scary, took place on a Halloween episode several years ago, and that was episode 166. And I shared with you that I'm from Richmond, Virginia. We had all sorts of great people come through Richmond, Virginia, and Edgar Allan Poe had residence in Richmond, Virginia for a while. And there was a place there called Poe's Tavern, actually not too terribly far from where the St. John's Church was. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven, and The Raven is one of my favorite poems by Edgar Allan Poe. I also shared during episode 166 that my wife loves Edgar Allan Poe, and on our very first date, we found that we had that in common. And on our second date, I gave her a complete works of Edgar Allan Poe as a gift on our second date. And of course, 28 years, folks, it's history from there. But I am sharing this with you because I definitely felt butterflies when I was reading The Raven to you. So, to celebrate Halloween, which was one of the scariest episodes that I have ever done on the Scaling Up H2O podcast, and now one of my favorite episodes because of the experience of it, here is a replay of yours truly reading Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven from episode 166. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore. for the rare and radiant maiden who the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain wrestling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now to still the beating of my heart I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is someone at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mane of lord and lady perched above my chamber door. Perched above a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched, sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, "Thou that crest be shown and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on this night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast above the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven sitting lonely on the placid bust spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his song one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, nevermore." But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, "Nevermore." This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall pass here, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfume from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thou Goth had lent thee, by the angels he had sent thee, respite, respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh, quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore. Desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore. Is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden who the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden who the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thou shalt have spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit thy bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the amplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Join the Rising Tide Mastermind. Discover a community where passionate professionals come together to support each other's growth. Be part of a tribe that celebrates your wins and helps you overcome challenges. Don't navigate your journey alone. Find your community with us, the Rising Tide Mastermind. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.